Good evening. This is Wednesday evening, December 1st, 2021, and this is a resumption of yesterday's Lane County Board of Commissioners meeting. We are on item 21 on our agenda, County Administration. This is now the time for continued public hearing for ordinances 21-11, 21-12, and 21-13. Agenda item 21A, B, and C. Ordinance 2111 in the matter of reviewing and modifying the district boundaries for election commissioners map J. Excuse me. Ordinance 2112 in the matter of reviewing and modifying the district boundaries for election of commissioners map Q. And 2113 in the matter of reviewing and modifying the district boundaries for election of commissioners map C. A first reading took place on November 9th, 2021. As part of the 2021 redistricting effort, Lane County created an independent redistricting committee and charged that committee with proposing 2 to 4 maps in ordinance form for adoption by the Lane County Board of Commissioners. On November 9th, 2021, in the form of a first reading, the Independent Redistricting Committee presented 3 maps, and they are in order by preference: map J, map Q, and map C in ordinance form. Before we begin with continuing the public hearing, we will have a staff presentation. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Judy Williams, our Strategy and Integration Manager for that presentation. Ms. Williams.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Chair Bernie, Commissioners. I'm Judy Williams here, our Strategy and Integration Manager. And I'm also joined via phone for questions later on in the meeting. Our chair of the Independent Redistricting Committee, Morgan Monroe, is here. County Counsel, Steve Dingle, is here as well, and Cheryl Betchart, our county clerk. So I'm going to go through a quick presentation and then turn it back over to you for the public hearing. I'm going to briefly kind of walk through, I would say it's about a 10-minute presentation, really kind of just briefly going through the phases of redistricting. There was a more thorough presentation on November 9th. And so this is hopefully to provide a high-level overview of what we're presenting to you tonight. I'm going to go over the Independent Redistricting Committee's charge and the process that they took on, as well as a brief walkthrough of the 3 proposed maps. I'll briefly talk about voting preference as we get to later in the evening, and then turn it over to you for the public hearing piece. So this may look similar to many of you, and it's really kind of how we look at our redistricting process. We've had several phases, and really that first phase is kind of, it started in 2019 to really look at what do we want for this process, knowing that it was coming up. We had lots of conversations with the community, listening sessions, work sessions to really get at what is an inclusive and transparent process so that we can do this work and do it well. And that is what came up, that is how the Independent Redistricting Committee idea came upon us, and we had an ordinance to formally adopt that. Phase two was really the formation of that committee. So we took on applications. We had 50 applicants that were committee members that were ready and willing to serve on this committee. Commissioners chose 1 applicant through a blind process for that committee makeup. And then those 5 really hands-on, had about 4 meetings altogether to really find out who the 10 remaining positions would be, and 3 alternates as well. We did a lot of training and as much preparation as we could before that data came, once that full committee was on board. Phase 3 was really, we'd had the census data. We wanted to start the work creating those maps, and we are now here at phase 4 in front of you at the Board of Commissioners level, as the charter states that we do this work in an ordinance fashion. And so this is what the process is in front of you. Our lane code is specific around the piece where the board is specifically moving forward with the recommendations of the committee, so not changing any of those proposals. The final phase is phase 5 is really the elections piece of it. So once the map is approved, there's several other layers of City of Eugene, other districts, fire districts, LCC, many other jurisdictions that have their work ready to go once our decision is made. And then finalization with elections by the end of the calendar year to get everything ready for the next upcoming election. Briefly, the charge for the Independent Redistricting Committee is really 3 major things. One, as was stated, prepare 2 to 4 plans in ordinance form, and the committee chose to submit 3 maps to the commissioners. The second was that the proposed plans must comply with relevant law relating to redistricting, voting rights, and applicable laws. And that was voted that the 3 maps were in compliance. And then finally, rank the proposed maps in order of preference and report on those strengths and weaknesses. So by order of preference, the committee has chosen map J, map Q, and map C in that order to move forward. In the board material, which is on the website, and in the board packet, there is a more lengthy document that really walks through the strengths and weaknesses and is that formal report from the committee. And as the committee met, again, early on, the training was key in the early stages. What criteria was the committee going to look at? That really came from the state directive. So Secretary of State has an official redistricting directive that I will talk about in a couple slides from here. And that really provided that baseline. In addition, the committee looked at population results from the 2020 census, where the growth was occurring. There was a lot of conversation with the committee on communities of common interest, what those looked like, where they were, how would they fold that into the process. The committee talked quite a bit about the Lane County Charter and many of the aspects of the charter that applied here. I will also go into a little bit more detail in the next couple slides. And then looking at all of those pieces, what layers might be of interest to the committee when we're looking at redistricting software specifically. And then as committee members were able to create maps, they presented, I believe it was 19 in total official maps that they presented amongst the group. And there was always room for feedback from public comments, as well as from staff and from other committee members. And I will just note that every meeting that we had, over about 20 meetings or so, all noticed appropriately, had public meetings law in mind, all were recorded and minutes taken as well. And public comment specifically was an option at every meeting. Briefly on the redistricting directive that came from the Secretary of State to really kind of define that baseline criteria of what to consider. Essentially, it's each district, as nearly as practicable, shall be contiguous, utilize those existing geographic and political boundaries, not divide communities of common interest, be connected by transportation links, and for districts be of equal population. And that is also very apparent in both the federal application as well as our local charter. It really drives in the equal population aspect as well. A couple other points that are a part of the redistricting directive also speak to districts shall not be drawn for the purpose of favoring any political party, incumbent, elected official or other person. It also states, districts shall not be drawn for the purpose of diluting the voting strength of any language or ethnic minority group. So I wanted to put up the population numbers, as this was kind of, again, in addition to that criteria, is really kind of that baseline. Where did the committee start? And so looking at the census information, that first column, this is a breakdown by district. So you'll see District 1 through 5, our 5 commissioner districts, and the population as the census relays. That second column is, okay, if everyone was equal in that district, we're looking at 76,594 per district in population. And so you can see the differences there that, primarily the growth over the last 10 years has really happened in District 4 or North Eugene, and District 3, which is also known as South Eugene. And so really just kind of showing this as to that starting point of looking at which districts in particular may need to have less population or alterations, and which districts may need to pull in some additional population to have that equal population. The piece on the local or the charter language that I wanted to quickly highlight here is the district descriptions. And this came up quite a few times in conversations with our committee. Nearly every time that an individual proposed a map and had reviewed that, these conversations came up. And I'll read a couple of these. So the first, as the charter is describing the makeup of a district, it reads as follows. The West Lane County District, generally comprised of Western Lane County outside of the metropolitan area. Springfield District is generally comprised of the Springfield metropolitan area. South Eugene District, generally comprised of the South Eugene metropolitan area. And further on, and so really just there was a lot of discussion, and the piece that was most difficult here is just really getting at what does generally comprised of mean? Where, if at all, is that further defined, and as well as a metropolitan area. And there was some research, myself, legal counsel, we looked at language from 1976 when the county was looking at moving from 3 districts to 5. There was a lot of discussion, and we looked through those minutes to try and define and see if we could pull out if there was any specific detail around alluding to what generally comprised of might mean in metropolitan as well, but we did not find that specificity. So really going back quickly on the population piece, I just bring this up too as kind of reflecting on the areas where we've seen that growth. Again, North Eugene, South Eugene, in the more urban areas. One thing that the committee too just also not struggled with, but just noted, as population does grow in our county, it's concentrated within the UGB. That's just left the committee in an especially tough area, and a tough question to resolve, as we have to make some movements, and you'll see in the maps alluded to in a little bit that there are just 3 different options that take into consideration all of these factors and show them in different ways. Briefly, also just population is one piece, the state directive, kind of that criteria level, charter language, communities of common interest, all of these pieces helped start the conversation into how does the committee now move forward and create these maps? What kind of layers do we want to look at? What other aspects, when we're having public comment, what are we asking the public to give us some input on? And I just wanted to show briefly this screenshot of this software that we were using in the committee. And it's just really to note as an example. So there's a pink District 5 shown here, a green area, District 3. And if a map maker was making some changes, there was a number of ways to go about making movements to lines or incorporating one district into another. And just to point out that it may not always be an easy line, factoring all of these other, communities of interest, what are the transportation links. There's also a layer of census blocks. So you can't just grab one little area, it has to be per census block. And a block could be a population of 0, or it could be hundreds of people. So it's a balance between gives and takes, where you can trying to factor in all of those pieces. So just wanted to show you that as that is what are these map makers and the committee themselves were tackling. So again, as I mentioned, all of the proposals that I'll walk through in a moment are really just different ways of showing how one came about all of these considerations. So to get at that equal population, we do have each map at a within a 1% variance, up or down, both ways, that you'll see. So as has been mentioned, since September 1st was the first meeting, lots of input, lots of great discussions. All of the conversations were done via Zoom, so all virtual. So it added another layer to pieces too, but also helped in some aspects as well. But just wanted to point out, every member was able to raise questions, talk through issues. Staff had input, legal counsel had input. We had several discussions, debates over some topics or issues, particularly around conflict of interest, those district descriptions in the charter, a number of topics. And so again, and as people were making recommendations or reviewing maps, there was always feedback as well. So briefly, I'll quickly walk through the 3 maps. And so starting at a high level, this is a zoom out of the entire county. So map J is that first map that was presented by the committee in order of preference. In the maps here, you'll see a thick red line, and that line is existing commissioner district boundaries as they are currently. And so, here quickly you'll see, between District 1 and District 5, the east and west. From the south, there is no changes here. There is more changes, and so I'll zoom in a little bit closer in that metropolitan area. So here, map J, and the goal, this is coming from a summary from the committee themselves. The goal of map J is to really strive to unify River Road and Santa Clara, strive to unify the Bethel School District within one commissioner district, and strive to maintain districts 1 and 5 as primarily outside the Springfield and Eugene UGB. Very briefly, I'll walk through some of those changes. So again, the bold red is existing commissioner district boundary lines. So for instance, you'll see in a change with District 4 of some of that pink area moving more north and capturing the Bethel area. But in the goal of striving to keep River Road, Santa Clara, you'll see that yellow coming from the District 1 aspect. Other minor changes to note in District 3, for instance, some movement in the City View, Oak Patch area, where it's moving from District 3 into District 5. Some to the north of District 3, expanding a little bit north here. Also expansions of District 2, the Springfield District, a little bit north of Beltline Road, and also south, encompassing that CV Loop area, Laurel Hill area, and Russell Creek Basin. Briefly, moving on to map Q, the second map that was forwarded by the committee. Map Q strives to maintain transportation corridors, maintains I-5 as the western boundary of District 2, places the majority of Bethel School District in one district, strives to unify school districts and 4J catchment areas, and strives to unify the Churchill neighborhood areas and River Road Santa Clara neighborhoods. So keeping it on that zoomed out level, you will see some changes here from District 1 and District 5. So District 5 in the southern area encompassing more of what is currently in District 1. And then I'll zoom in at the metro area view. You can see some of the changes here again, starting in maybe District 4, the North Eugene area. That unification of River Road Santa Clara is now in the District 4 area, but also north of that as well. You'll see in District 3 in the blue, there is some of the District 5 capturing what was some of that area, unifying that Churchill area piece, but also to the south, clearly encompassing areas of Pleasant Hill and Cresswell, and some east of Jasper Road area. In addition, District 2, there is an expansion of this area in the purple that is north of Marcola Road, Mohawk Marcola, and McKenzie View Drive area McKenzie View Drive that would be in District 2 as well. And finally, Map C. Map C really strives to make as few changes as possible to the current district boundaries, uses major roads for those district boundary lines, and strives to maintain District 1 and 5 as primarily outside the city limits of Eugene and Springfield. Again, at this zoomed out level, you'll see an area to the south that is moving into, it's a Lorraine area, moving out of District 1 and into District 5. And as we zoom in closer, you'll see maybe less changes in some of the previous two, but District 4 here has some changes just around the Beltline, sorry, get this right, it's a Devo Street to Beltline. There's a modification here in that yellow area. And then and just north of that West 11th area, you'll see a change here where District 5 is encompassing what used to be part of District 4. Also pockets around the south of District 3 that have District 5 now being incorporated, areas of from kind of left to right or west to east, Shields Avenue to Chambers, Spring Boulevard area, East 43rd, and Old Dillard Road, to name a couple of those. And District 2, also the change here in the Springfield district also goes north, but also moves onto the other side of I-5 here. And so some of this area in the Harlow Road area that would be moving into District 2. So those are the three maps, and I just wanted to again show the population here. You saw the first box on the top left previously in the presentation, and then this just shows those map populations for those three maps, map J, Q, and C, with that variance of less than 1%. Two more slides and I'm almost done. This slide is really just trying to get at that piece of how do things look currently? So inside and outside the UGB, a map comparison. And what we have here is the first column of bar charts, really here on the most leftmost column is current districts. And you'll see District 1 and District 5 are those clearly more rural, less urban. And so you'll see that percentage population-based numbers here. And then looking at map J, map Q, and map C respectively, you'll see those numbers captured throughout. The second graph is really just kind of that flip of it and percentage outside the UGB. So again, the current boundaries as they are, with the difference between District 1 and 5, as you'll see, is the outside the UGB percentages, and then moving through the maps, you can see that breakdown as well. So that's the end of the presentation that I wanted to go over. And briefly, before we move forward with the next steps and turning over to you, Chair, for the public hearing, I just wanted to offer a few options for voting preferences. Speaking with legal counsel, Steve Dingle, just wanted to make sure that we were covering our bases in terms of, you have 3 ordinances in front of you. Wanted to really just, you have options, and we wanted to have the board make that choice. So there may be additional options, but just wanted to briefly walk through what those might be. And if possible, if you were willing to decide on which one to move forward prior to the public hearing, that would be appreciated. And I think just for transparency of just having that would be helpful. So there's an option of, after public hearing, having those discussions as you see fit, whether it's, each map, having those, that feedback on each of those. And then do you vote as a slate of maps? So, each commissioner votes for 1 map, and just to note, any map with 3 votes would move forward, and that is the one that is approved. Another option could be, again, that discussion on a map, but do we want to bring up each ordinance on their own and then vote on that specifically and separately? And again, if a map receives 3 or more votes, then that is approved. Or another option, do you want to, winnow down 3 maps down to 2, have more of that discussion on the remaining maps, and then vote as well? And so one final thought before turning it back over to you, Chair. Another option was staff is really hoping to have a decision made tonight. There was in the board packet an option to move to a 3rd reading on December 15th. And really the piece of that option was really to hold space for a discussion around what might happen at the state level, knowing that there were 3 challenges challenges at the congressional level and the legislative redistricting plans up in the air at the time we had the material. Those all 3 challenges have been dismissed. And so there isn't that need for staff to have additional overview of what the results of that was. So it's the timeline is really important to have a vote tonight, if all possible, as the City of Eugene, LCC, or fire districts, all of the other pieces that are waiting for their pieces are ready to go, and just timelines are critical. And so I just wanted to mention that too. So I will turn it over to you, Chair, to see if there is a preference on the map voting options prior to moving forward to the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I may, I know Ms. Betchart is on. For the public, could she possibly discuss why it's so important time-wise for us to make a decision this evening?
Yes, Chair Burney, commissioners, everybody can hear me okay?
Great.
Okay, thank you. So the reason the timeline is so critical right now is because our first major step, once the county commissioner lines are drawn, is to actually redraw all the precinct lines based on the map that you decide. Once that process is done, which we're estimating could take a week to 2 weeks of staff time, plus our GIS expert working with us to do that portion. Once that portion is completed, then we actually have to create the new combinations, which have to do with the individual addresses that everyone has to vote on, and it determines what you vote on. We have to create all those new combinations. There are changes in the rep lines, the Senate lines, now the county commissioner lines. The City of Eugene will be changing their ward lines. We have to prepare and implement those and apply them to the addresses so that when voters are voting or when candidates are filing, they know the correct precinct, for example, for precinct committee person, as well as additional filings that occur, because everything that you vote on All filings are based on your residential address. All of that work, that application of the new boundary lines, takes a large amount of time for us. There's an incredible amount of time for proofing to make sure that the voters receive the ballots that are correct for them when they vote in May. So that work is estimated to take probably 1 full month. So that's moving us now into January. And the city and other districts that are coming after you, Lane, ESD, and LCC, are waiting to make their decision based on which map the commissioners select. And the reason that that matters is because we want to minimize the number of splits that they have, so the number of ballot styles. We currently have right now over 400 splits in Lane County, which is your individual district combinations based on your address. So we want to minimize that number. That's why we like the boundaries matching up together. So that's why we wanted to wait till the representative lines were drawn so that the committee could consider that when they were suggesting maps to you. So
thank you very much. And if I may, I think all this is important. I've never gone through this before. I believe there are other commissioners that have, but normally would we be in this kind? Yeah, I see it, Jay. Normally, would we be in this kind of a time crunch? Would there normally be time to nudge and work with maps as opposed to having to, be against the wall to approve one or another? Ms. Betchart, Ms. Williams, anyone?
Thank you, Chair Burney, commissioners. So 10 years ago, I was here for that process as Commissioner Bozovich was. We were actually applying the changes up through the 3rd week of January, but the candidate filings did not start for precinct committee people until February 1st. Now that law has changed, and those candidate filings, that window is open now. So it means there's pressure to turn in those filings. And right now, the 2 major parties have agreed to hold off on filing. But now that the representative lines are determined statewide, we need to get moving as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much. Ms. Williams was trying to reach me, but I have meetings after our strategic planning meeting today. So until commissioners looked at what is now no longer in front of us as 3 options to move forward, it's news to me too. So does anybody have any preference as to what might be the most expeditious way to move forward? I have thoughts, but I defer to you all first. Commissioner Buck?
Start just so we can start talking about it. I don't really have any particular preference, honestly. I'm pretty open to any of them. But I do just want to know that we have people waiting to do public comment, and I'd rather hear from them, and then we can start going into that personally. I'm open to other people's views. So
you requested that we make this decision first. Can we make this decision after we hear public comment? Would that be all right? So people aren't kept waiting any longer?
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. I appreciate that. When I was reaching out to County Council just to try and confirm the process that was mentioned, just to have transparency and an overall understanding of what the commissioners, what you all wanted to do, but I do understand that there are people waiting, and we do want to hear from them. So I think just trying to have a layer of can we have that conversation rather than maybe just jumping into a motion right after a public hearing. I'm okay with that.
Good. And we're going to defer to the public and not take any more of their time than we have to. I'm going to continue here then. Are there any conflicts that excuse me, I've read previously all 3 of the ordinance titles, and we are going to have a continued public hearing today of all 3 of these ordinances at one time, as opposed to limiting public comment to 1 map or ordinance at a time. I will now open the public hearing on all 3 of these ordinances and accept any new testimony in support of or in opposition to any of the ordinances. I do want to make note that this is a continuation of a public hearing. If you've already testified, we're only taking 1 testimony per person. At this time, are there any conflicts that a commissioner wishes to declare? Seeing none. Ms. Jones, I'll turn it over to you first to help us determine how many people we have here for public comment in order to determine if we need to adjust the allotted 3-minute speaking time. Can you let us know how many people have signed up for public comment?
At this time, I have 6 people sitting out in the world waiting to speak, but I'm not sure all of them want to speak. So 6 people total.
Oh, well, in that case, for all of you sitting out in the world, we'll stay with the 3 minutes. There's no reason to decrease that. And Ms. Jones, if you would, please administer the public hearing.
Thank you. At this time, if you have signed up for the public hearing and you would like to speak, please raise your virtual hand. Please make sure to only press that button once so that it doesn't toggle off and on, because it will put your hand down if you press it again. At this time, I will begin the public hearing. I will start with Stacy Holt, followed by Cindy Land. Stacy, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment.
Good evening, Chair Burney and Lane County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Stacy Holt and I live in Cresswell. Thank you for allowing me to submit my testimony tonight. I appreciate the hard work of our Lane County Commissioners. They listen to our concerns, serve on committees, take on issues that impact us, and commit a great deal of time to our county experience. Fortunately, we choose our commissioners in a nonpartisan election. Commissioners may be affiliated with any range of political parties, but because they serve in a nonpartisan role, we know they are working for all of us in Lane County. I support Map C because it is the only map that respects the urban, Eugene, and Springfield and rural aspects of Lane County. Maps J and Q both have urban districts that expand well past the city limits and the urban growth boundary of Eugene, which I believe violates our home rule charter. Additionally, the fact that a member of the IRC and his wife worked on 2 of the commissioner's 2018 political campaigns, receiving a sizable amount of payment for his services, creates some ethical issues connected to the 2 maps he participated in creating. Additionally, the county stated that it was following state laws like ORS 188.010, which states, "No district shall be drawn for the purpose of favoring any political party, incumbent legislator, or other person." Let me ask you a question. How can anyone that received a large sum of money be impartial not to favor an incumbent legislator? Commissioners, I hope you consider Map C. Not only was it not drawn by someone with a financial conflict of interest to incumbent county commissioners, but it also does not unnecessarily overrepresent Eugene by extending 2 of the Eugene districts outside city limits. Map C follows the charter. Maps J and Q have charter and ethical issues. I hope you send a message to your constituents that you intend to remain a nonpartisan body by choosing the map that best represents we the people in a nonpartisan way, which is Map C. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker will be Cindy Land, followed by Tiffany Monroe. Cindy, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public comment. Cindy, I do show yourself muted. Whoops, I've got the, whoops, hold on. Cindy, I do show yourself muted.
There we are. There we go. I'd like to introduce myself to Commissioner Burney. Hi, Commissioner Burney. I'm Cindy Land. I'm a 37-year resident of East Lane County Commissioner's District. Commissioner Burney, I live in South Eugene, west of I-5 in the LCC Basin in the Laurel Hills area. I'm west of Lane Community College. I'm inside the Eugene Metro Plan. I'm using the Eugene urban growth boundary, both inside and outside of it. I'm in the proposed Eugene Urban Reserve. I'm in the Eugene 4J School District with a Eugene address in 97405. Why does this matter to you, the Springfield City or the Springfield County Commissioner? Map J is so flawed, I would become your constituent. I have very little in common with Springfield. Map C is fair, it's less disruptive to our county and our county's democratic process. And I would appreciate it if you would vote to protect Springfield and the integrity of Springfield. Map J would make Springfield's Commissioner District no longer in compliance with generally metropolitan Springfield. Map J creates a Eugene Springfield District. Number 2, the Springfield-Eugene amended Metropolitan General Plan separating the urban growth boundaries between those two cities to facilitate different goals in affordable housing, jobs, and future growth is Springfield Ordinance 6361. They're two separate areas. Map J, Springfield could end up with a South Eugene resident as their county commissioner. I'm hoping you're loyal to the people in Springfield who voted for you. I'm hoping you feel an obligation to protect the thousands of proud families who value the unique character of Springfield enough to rise above party or political ties. Thank you. Please vote for Map C. It's the right choice for Lane County.
Thank you for your public comment. I have just been informed also that my clock is not showing, and that is because I am not the presenter. So give me 1 minute to change back to being the presenter, and I will continue. Our next speaker will be Tiffany Monroe, followed by Kevin Lemieux. 1 moment. Okay, so hopefully now everyone can see the timer. And Tiffany, I will go ahead and unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Good evening, Chair Bernie and Commissioners. My name is Tiffany Monroe. I have been fortunate to follow this process and have submitted testimony as well as verbal testimony to the Independent Redistricting Committee on behalf of Lane Families for Farms and Forests and the Lane County Farm Bureau. I am very blessed to be born and raised in Lane County. My father has been in the area farming since the late 1800s, and my mother, out of all the places to move in the world, chose to move from Kenya, which is located in Africa, to Junction City and later into Eugene. Being a part of this community for generations, I feel very passionate about community interests as well as physical boundaries that you can see just by enjoying the county, by driving around, by attending meetings. And you can see there are some real boundaries that exist for those that live and reside in the county. When listening to the presentation earlier, I couldn't help but, be taken aback to have a physical reaction to looking at maps J and Q. They combined communities that make absolutely no sense. And the only reason why I can imagine those maps being drawn in those matters is to be able to secure certain outcomes for the future. There's no validation for those changes, whether looking at population change or any other reason. I strongly encourage all of you to support Map C. I believe that it, out of all other maps, follows the charter, which is something that we definitely want to secure when selecting a map, because that is our obligation. And I believe that when referring back to communities of interest, Map C helps secure some of those, as well as some of those natural borders. For myself, being a part of rural Lane County, as well as parts of Benton County, my family farms in a large area, I think it's really important to secure the voice of our rural Lane County residents. But overall, I just want to thank all of you for your time. And I just really hope that we do the right thing and support Map C, because it is the only map that truly makes sense for Lane County. Thank you so much. And I hope you all have a successful meeting.
Thank you for your public testimony. Our next speaker is Kevin Lemieux, followed by Crystal Vincent. oops, I'm sorry, it looks like it's Caitlin Lemieux. I don't know why I saw Kevin. I apologize for that. Caitlin Lemieux, followed by Crystal Vincent. Caitlin, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your public testimony.
Good evening, Chair Bernie and County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Caitlin Lemieux. I live in West Eugene in the Bethel area. I want to speak to you today about West Lane area, where I'm from. I'm an office manager there for a transfer and recycling company. West Lane area is Lorraine to Junction City, everything west of Eugene, but east of the tunnel on Highway 126. We share a couple of school districts, a newspaper, and many shared industries of winery, tourism, and natural resource industries. Our company serves around 10,000 people in the rural West Lane area. My drivers on average drive 300 miles a week, 1,200 miles a month. So needless to say, transportation is critical to us. We need safe roads for our drivers and for the public. Two of our main transportation concerns in West Lane are Highway 126 and Territorial Highway. Both are 55-mile-per-hour, two-lane highways that we have customers on. Our trucks and drivers enter and exit these highways, and safety is a major concern of ours. Since Lane County has taken over the responsibility of Territorial Highway in 2019, we have seen some great improvements. Specifically, the Stony Point realignment project near Lorraine. Awesome work, Lane County Public Works. We are so grateful for you. West Lane is a community of interest, and how you should keep this area together or group it with other communities of interest with similar priorities. Lane County released a Transportation Safety Action Plan in 2017 that analyzed the traffic crashes. It summarized that the most significant finding is that there is a disproportionate impact on rural Lane County with regard to the number of fatalities, particularly when compared to population. In this context, urban is defined as the Central Lane Metropolitan Planning Organization, which encompasses the cities of Coburg, Eugene, and Springfield, home of roughly 255,000 citizens. The remaining 100,000 or so in rural Lane County have to drive these highways for work and daily life. This issue has persisted for decades, and major safety issues concern us every day in our line of work. After reviewing the plans presented by the committee, I support Map C. It has all of West Lane into one district, which is just ideally, it's the most important thing to our business, for our commuting, commuting customers and our employees in general. My biggest concern with Map J is that it extends the North Eugene district well into rural areas like Alvador, splitting rural families into separate districts and combining them with voters who have different priorities, specifically transportation. Map C just ensures that our issues stay our issues and we will not be split up. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Crystal Vincent, and I do show that Crystal is the last person who has their hand up to speak. So if you did register and wanted to give public testimony, please raise your hand. Crystal, I will unmute your microphone and you may begin your testimony. Crystal, I do show yourself muted. There you go.
Okay. Greetings, Lane County Commissioners. For the record, my name is Crystal Vincent. I live in North Eugene. I live in the Sheldon area, but I work at the edge of the Churchill neighborhood. And between growing up in Eugene, driving my kids around and making deliveries for my job at the flower shop we own, I feel like I have a good understanding of the different areas of this city. I support Map C because it really does the best job of honoring the North and South Eugene areas. In my eyes, there are only two boundaries that really divide North and South Eugene, either the Willamette River or I-105. Map C is the only map that uses either one of those options. Here are some examples of how the two areas are different by my eyes. North of the river, there's wider streets, newer homes, larger residential lots, commercial specific buildings. There is a clear difference when crossing the Ferry Street Bridge to head to work south of the river. South of the river, narrower one-way streets surrounded by student housing and condos, and beautiful but older homes converted to offices or multifamily housing. That includes different demographics, interests, housing, priorities, transportation between the two areas. Additionally, I am also surprised that I haven't heard much about the fact that Map C is the only proposal that was drawn by a woman. That would be a historic moment for Lane County government. Lane County Board of Order about racism as a public health crisis made the statement to use an equity lens to form policy recommendations. This would be an opportunity to put action behind your words. As a female business owner, it means a lot to me. Please consider supporting MAP C. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not have anyone else registered to speak, so I will turn the meeting back over to you, Chair Bernie.
Thank you, and I'm going to do something odd. To the last presenter, my wife also does flower deliveries for Thurston Flowers, so you really caught my attention on that one. Forgive me. Commissioners, I know how I would like to proceed given the options that Judy gave us to sort of winnow this down, but I think I'd like to hear from you first if anyone has any thoughts on the subject. Commissioner Bozovich?
I wouldn't mind if we had a little bit of generalized discussion to see if maybe there was one map that just falls off the table and then we can get down to deciding between the two or something. And I just wanted to say the issues around a certain IRC member don't disqualify any of the maps from consideration in my mind. It doesn't rise to the level of statutory conflict at all. So that I just want the other commissioners to know that in my decision making, that isn't my decision is going to be about which maps make the most sense, which ones I'm hearing the public support, and not I'm going to ignore some of the testimony relative to that issue.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. And hearing no objection to your thought of commissioners weighing in to see if one map falls out, would you like to begin that or no?
I haven't heard any support, written or public, for map Q. And I look at that map as being probably the most drastic rearrangement of our districts of all three maps. If I was going to pick one to toss out of the group, it would probably be map Q.
Why don't we see if there's even close to a consensus on that, if other commissioners want to weigh in? Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you. I have a procedural question. I'm hoping County Council's on the line and can just confirm for us. We have 3 ordinances in front of us. I mean, admittedly, I have been on the commission the least amount of time, but I've never seen us just decide to not address an ordinance on our agenda. So it seems to me the only way to do what Commissioner Bozovich is suggesting is to start with the ordinance 20-11, which is map J. And if the vote, if it receives a majority, then it makes the other 2 ordinances moot. I'm asking County Council, is there a legitimate way we can take an ordinance off our agenda without having a vote that renders it moot, or without it dying for lack of a motion to begin with or a second to that motion?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. That's complete, Chair Bernie, Commissioner Trieger, that's completely up to you. You can decide how you want to proceed. I think the idea, at least as what is being proposed, is that there be some discussion about whether or not folks support that idea. If they do, then there would be a motion to remove whatever map it is, Q, from consideration. If it's seconded, there'd be a vote, and then you'd be down to 2. I think, right, as I understood right now, this was just, is there even consensus for that?
Anyone?
So I'm hearing County Council saying it needs to be a motion that needs a second and needs to be voted on to remove map Q from consideration. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if I may, I think first, Commissioner Trieger, it's ordinance 21-11, not 20-11. That's okay. I do it more than you do. And I believe Councilor also said right now we're just talking to see if there's consensus around even making that motion. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks, Chair Bernie. An option that you have as the chair is to call for consideration of a particular ordinance and ask for a motion on any ordinance, any of the three. And if there is some discussion about map Q, which Commissioner Bozievich just stated there's been very little public support for, then you could ask for consideration of 21-11, is it? And ask for a motion on that. And if there is no motion, then it dies for lack of motion.
Okay, map Q would be 21-12.
Okay.
I know, listen, yes, Commissioner Buck.
Thank you, Chair. It just seems a little awkward here, and I know that we're just talking about how we want to proceed, but I wanted to acknowledge the fact that we tasked an independent redistricting committee together. They did a lot of extensive work. So before I go into that, I just want to give out my huge appreciation to everybody who volunteered on that particular committee and spent so much time doing all their work and doing everything that we asked of them, really. We asked them to review the procedures, review the census, put together these maps, put them in order. And I would like to honor that particular ask of them that we originated here as we began this whole journey into redistricting. I know there's different ways that we could go about that, but that is what we asked of them. And they have presented maps in order to us. As an aside to that, I want to just make it crystal clear to all of my fellow commissioners and anybody in the public that is watching. I have not personally employed or as commissioner anybody on the redistricting committee, and I don't plan to in the future. So I want to make sure that any discussion regarding conflicts of interest is null and void as we're discussing this into the future here. We purposely put together the committee in a very inclusive way. We included everybody politically from the left to the right and everybody in between. And that was intentional. I want to give the respect to the committee that that they deserve and that we endowed upon them. So personally, I would like to discuss it in the order in which they presented it to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Because this is our deliberation. Are there any other comments at this time? Yes, Commissioner Trieger.
I just want to support, I have some more comments, but I do want to support what Commissioner Buck said, and in particular, acknowledging the work of the committee. I know we have at least the chair, if not also the vice chair, listening in tonight. And when Ms. Williams presented and talked about the 20 meetings, I did quick math, assuming those were 2 to 3, sometimes more hours per 18 people. Well over 1,000 volunteer hours were committed to this work. Not to mention the extra work staff in Ms. Williams, LCOG, folks that supported this project, our elections clerk, our county council, and I also want to mention Laura Holtgreave, who's behind the scenes taking minutes, and those minutes are a critical, important part of the public record of the work of this committee. So this has been a robust, a thorough, a fair process, and one that engaged community, which we all talk about how we want to do a better job of outreach and engagement with constituents. And it was by design across all of our districts. So I want to, I have comments very specific to this process and the maps, but I just wanted to, as a standalone, appreciate the work of this committee.
Do you want to continue with your other comments, Commissioner?
Sure, I will read them. So the purpose of this committee was to create a process that had transparency and integrity and required constituent engagement and keeps the commissioners at an arm's length from influencing the drawing of district boundaries while retaining the ultimate accountability with our vote tonight. A large motivator for establishing the process came from the people and their utter dissatisfaction with and mistrust of the process 10 years ago, which yielded the current district boundaries. Like with every policy or decision we make, there likely is no such thing as a map that pleases everyone. Because of population growth and the nature of being such a geographically large county with both a metropolitan center, rural small communities and towns, plus unincorporated areas, there will always be a certain tension in how best to represent and serve the differing or unique needs of these communities. At the end of the day, every constituent gets one commissioner to represent them. And then it's up to the commissioners to take the time to learn their district and to be responsive to the constituents' concerns, no matter which part of the district they live in. Each of our districts, even mine in South Eugene, have very different microclimates within them in terms of socioeconomic status, housing stock, industry, and so on. I've read every single piece of written testimony that's been submitted, as well as listening to those who called in yesterday and this evening. And it is abundantly clear to me that a majority of these comments were the result of a coordinated campaign stirred up by Commissioner Bozovich's multiple social media posts and internet radio nonsense, making false claims of undue influence and assertions of conflict of interest in this process, regardless of one sentence he uttered at tonight's meeting just a few minutes ago. Our own county council, as well as the Oregon Ethics Commission, has indicated no such conflicts exist. The commissioner's tactics are the real political interference in this process. And what's most disturbing is the outright lie he has repeatedly told that one of the individuals on the commission drew 2 of the 3 maps under consideration tonight. This false claim not only erases the collective and iterative hard efforts of the entire committee, which gave input on all the maps, it specifically disrespects the work of the chief draftsman of Map J, George Greer, who's a Springfield resident of 50 years and a retired 40-year public servant here in Lane County. He is in fact the only drafter of one of the 3 final maps. He is not now and has never been a political consultant. I hope you'll all pay special attention to his written testimony, which I believe is on pages 75 and 76 of the record, to see it in his own words. It's no surprise that this committee attracted applicants who care about and pay attention to elected offices. We have a former state legislator on the IRC, a former candidate. There are people who worked for Lane County and partnering organizations on the IRC. Commissioner Farr's direct report is a former mayor of Eugene. And yes, we even have political consultants on the IRC, including Commissioner Bozovich's direct appointee. Kevin Cronin was not selected or appointed by anyone on this board. He was selected by his peers, the initial 5 IRC members, using a heavily redacted application, same as the others. Additionally, he had no more opportunity to contribute a map than any other committee member, nor, more importantly, did he get any more votes on which maps to present to us for consideration tonight than any of the other committee members. Compromise is always in order, but integrity is not one of those things to be compromised. It is deeply disappointing to me that the sincere work done by this all-volunteer community-led committee has been marred by hyper-politicization, misinformation, and stop-the-steal-style inflammatory tactics from a sitting commissioner. Some of you have heard me say before that the process is an outcome. We should be proud of the bold steps we took to create a first-of-its-kind independent redistricting committee in Lane County. And while I understand IRC members are working on a feedback report for us to suggest ways to improve the process in the future, the notion that there's room for improvement in no way is a reflection on or measure of the validity or quality of the work product this committee has put before us. So in conclusion, we 5 commissioners unanimously approved this process. The process asked the committee to present us with 2 to 4 maps in their ranked order of preference. Map C came in last, Q second, and Map J received top ranking, being voted first choice by far if you look at the minutes from the meetings. It meets all of the requirements of population distribution, boundary integrity, and our charter and other regulations and requirements. There is no legitimate reason not to agree with the committee's conclusion. And I wholeheartedly support their recommendation of map J, and I'm prepared to make a motion on that ordinance when the time comes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Bozievich, I saw your hand before. If with your indulgence, before I call on you, this might be the right moment to share that in my reviewing of a good chunk of the work, the recordings of the Independent Redistricting Commission, one of Commissioner Farr's appointments, or his only appointment, Mayor Tory, made a remark which I really loved, and I just want to remind us of that now, which was he really appreciated the way the Independent Redistricting Committee operated, and he said there have been times where we have strongly disagreed, but we have never disagreed by being disagreeable. And I really want to call that out, commend him on it. And with that, of course, please, Commissioner Bozievich, thank you for allowing me to just insert that.
Thank you. And I am greatly disappointed to hear one of my fellow commissioners tell direct lies about me. I would like for anybody to show that I have ever said that maps J and Q should be disqualified. I would like for anybody to show that I have said that Kevin Cronin was solely the author of 2 of the 3 maps. I've said he was involved, and it is obvious if you go back to the minutes of the meeting of October 15th at 52 minutes in, Mr. Greer describes map J as a combination of his map I with Kevin's map F. And it was a conglomerate of those 2 maps, which does mean there was some involvement there. So, yeah, I've never said he was all the author, and I even clarified that several times to people. So that statement about he was involved with, he was the author of the 2 maps wasn't coming from me. And I would offer to retract that if anyone can provide proof that I've actually said that. Involved is one thing, actual author is different. Beyond that, so much of this is not, I didn't start this whole thing about the paid political consultant issues about ethics and all that. A member of the IRC did, and a citizen. They brought it to the press, and that's where it got out there. I haven't promoted it. I have responded to a misstatement about the fact that I also hired the same political consultant, which I did not, and he never worked for any of my campaigns. And I'm hearing additional misstatements about Jennifer Wagner, who has never been paid by any of my campaigns and has been out of political consulting for years, since she had to move to Alaska to keep her family's logging business going when logging failed here in Oregon. So, and then came back and returned to Florence. So I just want to say the aspersions that are being thrown out there, I also didn't lead some attempt to make a bunch of public comment. I have asked people to go to lanecounty.org/IRC multiple times on social media and in my program, review all 3 maps and decide which one for themselves met the criteria, and then provide us input. And I have not disclosed my preference publicly ever. So I just want to make that clear. So I've not made a claim that he authored 2 maps. Jennifer Wagner is not a political consultant, and I haven't been pushing one map over another. Now, what is fascinating, though, is a lot of the people that have testified, and I want to thank the people that did, spent a lot of their personal time reviewing the maps. And some of them had some really unique, interesting backgrounds to give commentary on. From people that traveled all over the county as HVAC mechanics, to somebody that runs a refuse company that travels a lot in the county, to somebody that's actually on the League of Women Voters. And majority of our public input from those hours of review and their backgrounds and expertise are supporting map C. We asked the committee to give us 3 choices and rank them. But what we specifically didn't do in our charge to them and in how we set up this committee was say that we had to accept the number 1. And what we're hearing now that it has been out in the public and public input's been available is an overwhelming support for map C. So as we move forward, we need to think about that and why people are supporting that. And most of the people have given more than adequate reasons for their support outside of anything to do with who drew what map or anything beside that. It's mostly been about trying to maintain the rural representation, keeping the Eugene districts within the UGB, keeping communities of interest together. Those issues have been the main reasons for supporting it. And then there's been some noise about other stuff. But that did not originate with me. I haven't specifically promoted. I did react to something and responded. That, you know, I just want to say I'm greatly disappointed to have those untruths told, unless Ms. Commissioner Trieger can tell me specifically when I said some of those things. Give me a reference.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Farr, Vice Chair Farr, I know you have had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at maps, I think I've been really quite silent on the issue so far. And I've been through redistricting twice with the City of Eugene. The first time was a heavy lift. The second time was moderate adjustments. And quite frankly, I think that the committee did a good job of presenting 3 very different maps. They gave us 3 very different choices that created a very different environment, a very different landscape. We're talking about map J as their first recommendation. I would support that less than map C. And the reason for it is if you look at District 3 in map J, it punches District 3 north of Beltline Road to encompass a part of the Harlow neighborhood. Our first redistricting with the City of Eugene, one of the most important things it did was exactly the opposite. It brought the ward, I believe it's Ward 5, it pushed that down to Beltline Road, making certain that the Harlow neighborhood was kept intact with the rest of the Ferry Street Bridge area and not lumped in with the South Eugene area, which in voting patterns and certainly demographics, there's a distinct difference. We all know it between South Eugene and North Eugene. The voting patterns are very different. The voting involvement is very different. So map J does the opposite in some ways of what the City of Eugene's heavy lift redistricting did. They really fixed the district, the ward districts of Eugene after the in the mid 1990s is when that occurred. So map J is less my favorite than map C. Map C remains, keeps things closer to intact the way they are. It's more of a moderate adjustment around the edges. And it does acknowledge that District 4, which is the district I happen to serve in, is oversized in terms of population. It trims District 4 in a couple of ways. It does put a part of District 4 west of Beltline Road, west of I-5 into Springfield. So it could be that somebody living in the shadow of Sheldon High School could be the Springfield county commissioner. Well, I guess we live with that kind of thing because there's no perfect mapping in this situation. So in order of preference, I'm going to just put it right out right now. I would choose map C as my first preference, map J as my second, and map Q, I think, is a little bit hideous in some of its recommendations, including putting the metropolitan area down into Cresswell and Pleasant Hill, and that just doesn't make any sense at all to me. So.
I thought
That's it. That's my ranked order of preference.
I know this is way too serious for me to say. I thought map Q made eminent sense. I'm sorry. No, I don't.
Well, I'm going to switch this up right now.
You know, I'd like to weigh in this way, if I might. I don't remember who, but one of the people that testified talked about. She targeted her remarks to me, and she said that I need to maintain the integrity of Springfield, and we can't have someone from whatever part of South Eugene she is be the Springfield County Commissioner. And I just want to point out, as I read the two maps that to me are the only palatable ones, which are which are J and C. Both of those, in order to deal with populations, have chunks of Eugene in them that weren't in them before we started this process. So I appreciate the comments, but I'm SOL either way, just to let you know. Here's my concern. By the way, my city of Springfield, every city councilor is elected by the entire city, even though they represent specific wards. So that body, while they're going to need to fine tune at some point, decided that this didn't need to be a polarizing issue at all, and left things as they were. I surfaced the thought some counties do the same thing. And I was just thinking out loud earlier today, gee, what if Lane County did that? Would that eliminate all this sort of hyper emotional, which to me makes no sense. I'm nowhere near as emotional about this as some of the people that have presented. And it was pointed out to me that, yeah, it actually was that way before home rule. And all three county commissioners came from South Eugene, and it just related to what have you. So I think this is as good a system as we can have. My concern is I don't want to go down a slippery slope that many people have warned me occurred 10 years ago. Now, I'd like to point out to those watching that 10 years ago, that Board of Commissioners redistricted. There was a districting committee that made recommendations. And what I've been told, because I didn't pay that close attention, it wasn't my thing, that in fact, the Board of Commissioners didn't take any of the recommendations of the redistricting committee, and apparently had enough time then, which we don't have now, to rework it a bit. Honestly, neither map J nor map C is my ideal, if I was God, which I'm not, but it's not my ideal map, but we don't have time to nudge around. What I'm concerned with is the slippery slope of empowering a body that spent countless hours, more than all the testimony we've gotten. We've gotten, what, 130 pages in our document. That is very clear. One map was made by Springfield's own George Greer, who also was with the Farm Bureau for quite a while. One from Kevin Cronin, and some of this, I would call them slanderous or riling people up statements that have been made. I would simply discharge as nonsense as it relates to self-interest from any commissioner here. I think every commissioner is doing the best they can for the county. We represent districts. We work on behalf of the county. But what I want to avoid is empowering a group to make recommendations, give us their priority, and then disempowering that group by allowing the tug and what have you of different issues. I assure you that if only one of these maps kept this, just using mine for example, the Springfield district just to Springfield, that's the one I would have voted for, but none of them do. It's just not there. So that's my concern. My concern is if people, not politicians, don't decide the districts, then we've got a problem. And we tried to create a process approved by all 5 commissioners that in fact enabled that. And one further point, because some of this stuff is just stuff. One further point, and that is that, well, I don't believe, Commissioner Bozovich, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe any commissioner appointed anyone that is the author of one of these maps. Well, actually, no, Commissioner, yeah, you did, but that's here nor there, as far as I'm concerned. It's just, it is what it is, and I want to take the recommendations of a group we supposedly empowered, and we had no idea who we were pointing to the thing. That's me weighing in. No on cue, and those are my concerns as I'm going to vote on this. And I'm sure we can have more discussion. Are there any other commissioners that want to weigh in additionally? Because this is a really important vote. Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. I tend to agree with you. You know, as a member of the League of Women Voters, and everybody knows that they've been a part of this process and have asked for independent committees for redistricting for the very purpose of having that arm's length distance from politicians like ourselves from drawing the maps. I wasn't part of their internal discussions and involvement in our situation because I'm sitting commissioner here and I knew I would be voting on this. But internally, I think what we began as an independent committee is actually quite a good example for others around the state. As we can see, it can get real political really fast. And it shouldn't be that way. It really, truly should be, as you and the league members say, people choosing their politicians and not the other way around. In this case, we have, as you mentioned, empowered the committee, and they ranked it. They gave us their recommendations. I want to honor that as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Krieger beat you by a hair, Commissioner Bozovich. I apologize. Commissioner Krieger?
Thank you. I think I can hear where everybody's kind of going with MapQ. What I find interesting about it, and to be clear, I'm not a proponent. I agree it doesn't make sense, but I think it's interesting to me that it was the second choice of the committee. I think it's going to be really instructive moving forward because as we're all talking about in different ways, or some of us are talking about in different ways, we represent a multitude of constituents even within a particular area. So even the three of us that represent metropolitan largely areas, as I mentioned, within my district, it is not a monolith. And so that sort of pinwheel or pizza wheel approach that a lot of other communities are looking at when you're faced with what we are, which is a large geographic area with a metropolitan center of sort of putting a circle around it and then dividing out from there to try to get your equal numbers of people. If we didn't have the names and the charter description that we do of South Eugene, North Eugene, Springfield, it would make actually quite a bit of sense, MapQ. So I think it's just going to be an interesting, before the next 10 years, and hopefully we won't be so under the gun with timing, to really look at what makes sense given the population of the county now relative to when that charter was developed. And get away from thinking about geographic descriptors and creating equal representation by districts. I think I really appreciate the committee's work in presenting MapQ as an exercise and something to consider. And I also just want to say, from what I understand about how the committee arrived at the maps, no one person drew one map and then the committee voted whether to keep it in the mix or not. There was it was an iterative process. It was a lot of participation by the entire committee. They really did quite a lot of work to develop, and then it was who actually did the drafting of the individual maps. So I just want to put that out there. It sounds like MapQ isn't going to garner a lot of support from any one of us, but to the committee, I want to say I think it was a really interesting exercise in what it can look like to sort of wipe the slate clean and take face value. How do we divide a county up into 5 equally proportioned districts? It's an interesting look at that.
Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner Bozovich, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I just want to, kind of remind folks that the whole reason we have an independent redistricting committee this time around was my initial attempts to try and get a charter amendment put on the ballot to establish this in the charter, which would have completely removed us from the process. One of my disappointments in not having that move forward was we set up the committee in a way where there was some influence of the commissioners in picking the committee members. I think the charter amendment actually had retired judges involved in the committee selection process. I can't remember the exact language, but it was put us even at more arm's length. So know that I support the idea of the redistricting, and it actually emanated from something I pushed originally. So I fully support the idea of an independent redistricting committee and trying to get it out of having elected officials choose their voters. That said, we set it up to have them present more than one choice because we understood we wanted to be able to pick from those choices. Picking one choice over another is a preference of the board, not a political exercise. We don't get, the way we've set it up now, we don't get to alter this map, any of these three maps. We just get to select one of them out of the three. Doesn't mean we have to select the preferred one. It just means we have to select one of these three. That's the procedure we set up. And if we follow that, we've followed the rules and we haven't put politics into this situation. So I just want to make that clear. That's what we set up. Those are the rules we established. We have three maps that were brought forward from an independent committee. I really appreciate the work they did, and they put a lot of time into it. And we just need to pick one of the maps. But it doesn't mean we necessarily have to pick the preferred option. And if we don't pick the preferred option, it's not playing politics. It's doing what we set out when we set up the redistricting committee by ordinance rather than by a charter amendment, and the way we did things in setting it up. So we're following the procedures. Whichever map we choose, we follow the procedures. And it's not really a political exercise. And we've actually removed ourselves pretty far away from the process. 10 years ago, we selected an option 8, which was one of the options actually that was presented from that redistricting committee at the time. It just wasn't their preferred option. And that's where it started getting things. But we held multiple public hearings and we had more time and did some tweaking based on that public input. So we're just kind of up against the wall here, timing wise somewhat, but we have run through a process. We have three maps in front of us. None of us was involved in preparing any of the three maps. And we just need to select one of them tonight. And then we followed the process. Whichever one we select is not really a political exercise. It's a preference.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner Buck, and then I know Vice Chair Farr also had his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to clarify something. Prior to Commissioner Bozovich discussing a charter change, this was actually indeed prompted by the League of Women Voters, who sent in a letter, and I asked for a work session to put some parameters around the next redistricting process back in 2019. I just want to clarify that because I want the League of Women Voters to know that we received that letter and they indeed prompted this.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair Bernie.
Joe works. It's after 7.
That's right. That's right. I trust this process. I believe that we did delineate what is a fair process and that the selection of the committee was done fairly. We have not declared conflicts of interest, any of us, based upon any prior involvement with any members of the committee, whatever that involvement may be. I guess if we were to start divulging things like that, everybody knows that I served on the Eugene City Council for 10 years. And for 8 of those years, Jim Torrey was on the Eugene City Council also. So we served on the elected body together. Everybody might, in fact, know that Alan Leisure I spent 16 years as a Bethel School Board member. I served on the Bethel School Board. My wife served on the Bethel School Board with Ellen Leisure. So we have all kinds of ways that it's hard to live in a county like this and not have involvement with people on a committee of this sort, so we're not talking about who were our political consultants, but I will say this, Jennifer Wagner in 2002, I ran for a state representative, and Jennifer Wagner was my political consultant for that race for state representative. I've not spoken to Jennifer Wagner. I don't think I've spoken to her since 2004. So, that being said, we all know everybody. And even blind processes don't seem very blind when it's really easy to figure out who it is you're looking at. So I trust the process. I believe we've come to a good conclusion. They've given us 3 maps that are very, very different from each other. One of them retains very close to the existent borders of the districts. The second one, which is map J, pushes out into the rural areas a little bit further, particularly in West Eugene, slices things up a little bit and makes some adjustments, more adjustments than map C. And map Q has a radically different approach to districting. So we have 3 very different maps to look at. I've stated my preference of the 3, and I would like to go ahead and begin making motions on ordinances, and let's have some voting.
I'm going to take the liberty of also participating and saying something. I just want you to know, Commissioner Farr, Pat, that if I could, I have map J blown up now, and if I could, I'd cut that tongue coming down. I'd cut it right off at the existing boundary, but we don't have the time to do that. It's just a little frustrating. I'm sorry, that was the only comment I wanted to make. So Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was going to offer to make a motion.
I think everybody wants to make a motion, and you asked first, so you're making the motion.
So I move passage of Ordinance 21-11 in the matter of reviewing and modifying district boundaries for election of county commissioners, map J. I move the adoption of map J.
It is an ordinance. We needed to state the ordinance number.
Did I not? Do I not have the most current ordinance number 21-11?
I'm sorry. Okay, good.
It is after 7.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Ordinance 21-11 in the matter of reviewing and modifying. Commissioner Trieger, I know these aren't your words, but these are the words here. In the matter of reviewing and modifying the district boundaries for election of commissioners, map J has been moved by Commissioner Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Buck. Is there discussion to the motion? Commissioner Bozovich.
You unmute. There we go.
Yeah,
it's after 7. So I'll be voting against this motion. Map J does some terrible things. There's been discussion supposedly that it unifies River Road and Santa Clara. Having lived in River Road, having been a founding member of the River Road Santa Clara Volunteer Library, served in the community organizations there, been part of the River Road Santa Clara Urban Services Committee, it divides those communities horribly. The school district boundary there cuts Santa Clara in 2, cuts part of River Road off, a corner of River Road, and it doesn't even reach all the way down to what's considered the base of River Road, which is the Chambers Connector, and takes part of River Road neighborhood against the river and splits it off from the rest of River Road. In fact, I think former Commissioner Handy's house gets kept in one district, but the rest of River Road's in another. The Bethel School District line makes absolutely no sense. And we've had testimony from folks on the that have been long-term members of the Santa Clara Community Organization, written testimony, not verbal, that talked about how that line doesn't make sense for the neighborhood. Santa Clara is very much a unified community of interest, and dividing it in that way just doesn't make sense. There was conversations about how much the Northwest Expressway and the railroad tracks divide those neighborhoods from other neighborhoods, and you're crossing over those lines with the Bethel School District line there. So I I can't see, and in good conscience, having lived there, having represented part of that neighborhood for so many years, knowing many long-term residents like Gary Wildish that object to this map, I can't support this map and adopt this map.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other commissioners? Commissioner Farr, Vice Chair Farr.
Thank you, Chair Bernie. As I stated, map J is my second preference. If we had voted in a different order, I would be potentially could vote in favor of map J. As it stands with this order of the voting, I'll be opposed to this motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other commissioners on this item? Before we vote, I would simply, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Trieger.
That's fine, Chair. I hesitated. I was looking for something and I couldn't find it quickly, but just the comment communities of interest has come up a lot. And of course, there are some unique interests to neighborhood associations, to certain rural communities versus other rural communities, or rural communities versus certain metropolitan communities. But communities of interest when it comes to redistricting is also a more, is a broader term, and it's not limited to, in fact, it often doesn't have anything to do with geographic, with physical location. It's about the unique interests, common interests of certain kinds of communities. And for example, I just remember back when we first started working on this earlier in November, we received, for example, some testimony specifically in favor of map J for what it does to some of the higher concentrations of communities of color, particularly Black communities, in terms of unifying. And when it comes to districting and voting rights, communities of interest is an especially important term when it comes to voting enfranchisement of communities of common interest, such as BIPOC communities. So I was trying to find that testimony really quickly, but it's buried back and couldn't quickly enough. But I wanted to offer that perspective because that term's been thrown around a lot, almost exclusively as it relates to a town or a municipality or a neighborhood or a school district. And it's a much broader and more impactful phrase when it comes to talking about voting rights and communities being being well represented.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bozovich.
So we haven't been presented any data behind demographics broken down at all on these maps. So it's difficult to make any judgments about whether one map is better at keeping minority interest together than another. I kind of wish we were back in 2011. We got data that clearly showed the map we adopted actually kept some of those communities of interest that Commissioner Trieger is speaking about closer together, particularly when we chose to keep Springfield only in Springfield. It kept a large Hispanic community together. The Bethel School District line, though, has absolutely nothing to do with a community of interest when it comes to matters of county concern. The Lane County Board of Commissioners has no control over schools, does not fund schools, does not set school policy, does not appoint school officials or hire school officials. What there is a real community of interest around for the neighborhood of Santa Clara is the Beltline Willamette River crossing, noise from the railroad tracks, the hodgepodge of patchwork annexation that's happened in their neighborhood, the extension of the North Bank bike path into the neighborhood. There are multiple issues there. There's issues of airport traffic noise that are common that have nothing to do with that school district boundary. That neighborhood is a community of interest. It is a fairly homogeneous neighborhood. It's a mixture of some older subdivisions that date back all the way into the 40s, up to some modern subdivisions in very intermixed. But it has a very much a commonality about transportation concerns. They're part of the Eugene UGB. They have a very much a common interest, and this map divides that neighborhood in two, and on an artificial boundary that has nothing to do with matters of county concern.
Thank you, Commissioner. just a comment in this discussion. One is, before I started hearing all these strong opinions, honestly, I was equally impressed with maps C and J. For me, and I don't think this might be the case with all commissioners, as I've already stated, the fact that map J was the one recommended by the group we wanted to empower, the Independent Redistricting Committee, is why I'm going to be supporting it. There are problems with it, and there are problems with all of these. None of these are perfect. I mean, if I had a wish, it would be that we weren't crunched against the clock, as Ms. Betchard explained, so we could work with this a bit more. People I respect a great deal also are mixed in their supports of the different maps. In fact, a couple of them actually support map Q, and I hope they're not watching because that's the one I just don't. And I also would like to say this. In the years since this has occurred last time, multiple commissioners have come and gone, and oftentimes, if one is going to accuse a political interest of drawing a map, then you can't quite explain why the proclivities or ideology or whatever you want to call it of commissioners representing that same district have changed, other than this is not the intent here is only to try and get it as right as we can, knowing we're not going to get it completely right. So I simply wanted to make those comments. The chair will entertain any other comments before we vote. Yes, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks, Chair Bernie. Hey, I'm a great mathematician. It doesn't take math to count to 3 to 2 on this at this point in time. But that being said, map J is a lot better if Harlow Road, the Harlow neighborhood, remains in North Eugene, which it is in North Eugene. Is just not a good, and for that reason alone, if we'd gone in a different order, I could very likely find myself voting yes on map J, but by voting in this order, it forces me to vote against map J.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. Completely understood and actually agreed with. Is there any other discussion to the motion? Okay, all those, excuse me.
Ordinance, roll call.
Really? Hey, thanks for pointing that out, Commissioner, before I made a fool of myself. Ordinance roll call. I think Samoka High School.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Trieger.
Well, wait a minute. Let's repeat the ordinance motion. The motion made by Commissioner Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Buck, is to approve Ordinance 21-11, map J, in the matter of reviewing and modifying the district boundaries for election of commissioners. I'm sorry, Steve.
That was a good move. Thank you. Commissioner Trieger.
Trieger votes aye.
Commissioner Buck.
Aye.
Commissioner Farr.
No.
Commissioner Bozovich.
No.
And Commissioner Burney.
Yes.
So the vote is 3 to 2 with Commissioners Farr and Bozovich voting no.
Commissioners, if I can get our agenda. Bear with me, I'm sorry. Okay. Independent Redistricting Chair Monroe and Vice Chair Dybens and everyone with us, would you please convey to your members our appreciation for all the hours and time that you and they have spent on this. Commissioners, thank you for disagreeing without being disagreeable. I believe we now are adjourning our November 30th and December 1st meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners. Everyone have a good evening.